Sir Riley,
Hello, how are you, Tanisha?
I messed up big time.
Oh, what'd you do?
So I should be in Philadelphia right now at the conference
Oh no, what conference?
because I have the wrong date
Uh,
of So I'm trying to re-register right now so I can go to the for the virtual one. I
oh,
just
the
checked the
virtual.
email. Yes, because I had the wrong date. Yeah.
Oh no. Okay. That means direction. Eddie's directions victory. Mark. There's Maury. Hey guys. All right, glad we're getting everybody here. Let's do this. All right, let me see if I can find this here. Awesome. All right, good. Hey Mari, how are you?
Hey Riley, great. How's it going?
Going well. So glad we got everybody here today. So we're still got a few people joining in. We're coming in from another meeting. So you'll see our group here. So I see you brought some friends as well. So hi, Hillary. Hey, Mark. Good to see you guys. So we'll go ahead and get kicked off here. So my name's Raleigh Wilkins. For those of you who don't know me, everybody does except for Mark. I'm the founder of Sales Platoon. I'm also a former U.S. Marine veteran. I spent about 20 years building sales teams from startups to NASDAQ, from very first rep hired to hundreds of reps under my command. Found a love for building and developing sales teams. A few years ago, stepped away from corporate America to take those skills and apply them to our U.S. military and training them. So these are all active duty military who are coming off active duty, who are exploring a career in B2B sales, who are really interested in talking to anybody other than me because they're stuck all day long with me on the phone. They are knee deep in it right now. This is not your typical sales training. This is not a hour in the morning and then, they go do whatever. This is 8 hours a day, full time, just like their full-time employee. They're pulling leads, they're researching lists, they're building value propositions, they're crafting value messaging. They're doing things that usually takes a rep 3 to 5 years to learn how to do. And they're only about 6 weeks in, 7 weeks right now. So they're going to company websites, building out compelling messaging, writing questioning statements, learning now. They're getting ready to go into learning discovery calls, getting into that. They're engaging with live clients already. They're going to be researching their next position. So they'll use Zoom info for that. So their exercise today, for example, and this week, their major exercise is going to be identifying 5 companies with open AE roles that have company size somewhere between 20 and 50 million with greater than 30 salespeople that are currently hiring. So they're going to have to use a combination of LinkedIn jobs, and Zoom info, then to go find the VP of sales, the head of sales, the sales manager, some type of a military contact within there, and then use Zoom info or any other opportunity they have to fill that information. And then they're going to go call them up and say, hey, I notice you have an open sales position. I'm curious, you ever thought about using active duty military to fill in that role? And they're going to say no. And they're going to say, we didn't think so. I'm actually one of those candidates. And they're going to sell their way into their next job the same way that we sell Zoom info or any other software product. So they're going to identify the right people, create a consensus, build a compelling use case, and then move forward. Internally, we really need your help. Mari did her best. So if you guys talking to your bosses and you want this type of talent on your team, they can sponsor us. Right now, you guys don't, because we are currently paying customers. So we're excited. We love the technology. So anything you guys want to share about your own stories, get to know these guys. They're very excited to hear your stories. But you guys have the full hour. That's our background. That's who we are. That's what they're doing. That's who I am. So we'd be interested in learning who you are. So Mari, I know you best. So I'll turn it over to you And then this is your hour. So enjoy. And I'm sure I'll be in and out during it. So I have other sales calls to be on, but they're yours. So
Thanks, Raleigh. Hey, team. I used to work with Raleigh in a previous cohort as your account manager. Hillary Scott here, who was on the call, took over as your account manager. But what I have liked to do in the past is talk a little bit about how I got into sales and bring over my colleague Mark, who is currently in the military, to kind of talk about his experience as well and how his experience in the military translates over to a sales role. I actually got into a sales role. Initially, I was a recruiter, and my team, my sales guy at the office would go on sales calls, and he would, try to sell recruiting services. And my job was to fill those jobs. His job was to get more roles for me to fill. But as I started to fill those jobs, I started to build a relationship with my customers, and I actually started getting orders directly from them, kind of bypassing my salesperson. He still got all the credit for bringing in those jobs for me to fill, but he actually reached out to his manager and he said, hey, we have a recruiter here who's bringing in a lot of the roles that, are kind of going under my name. I think she would be a good fit for one of those sales roles that we have open. So that's kind of how I got my feet into sales. I was in an organization where we didn't really have SDRs. So I was an account executive and I had to do my own cold calls. At the time, we didn't have anything like Zoom Info. So I really was calling company directories over and over and over and over again. And I was trying to guess emails. I would find one person's email and be like, well, maybe it's first dot last name, maybe it's first initial last name at. And that's kind of how I started. And I would start to try to generate my own leads and then call behind them. Then I would kind of come up with some emails. It was an outside sales role. So, when I got in touch with someone, and my goal really was to book a meeting. So my goal was to, I would have different pitches for, I'm going to be in your area, or I'm talking to the customer next door. And yeah, that's kind of how I got started. After a couple of years of that, I moved into tech, and that's how it's led me to Zoom Info. I think that role was it taught me a lot from it sounds like what you guys are learning right now in sales. But one of the things that I learned about in that account executive role was that I missed the continued relationship piece. So I was trying to get in touch with the customer, with a potential prospect, booking that meeting, going to that meeting. Once I signed the business, I was kind of passing it on. And really what I enjoy about sales is building that relationship and actually being able to talk to a person long-term and really build a true partnership. And that's how I got into account management. Mark, over to you.
I was going to say, do you want to take over too? Awesome. So as Mari said, Mari and me used to be on the same team. I've actually known her for quite a bit of time now, before I was even in sales, actually. So I started, I was active duty originally, active duty Air Force for 4 years. After I got out, I decided to join the Air National Guard. Basically, I've been in since 2010 is when I initially enlisted. Still currently in the Maine Air National Guard, but obviously during the week, I am an account manager on the same team that Mari used to be on, and actually on the same team as Hillary now. So it was definitely kind of a weird transition, which I'm sure you guys are all probably familiar with. Coming out of active duty, I was an F-16 avionics technician, so it had absolutely nothing with working with people. I was on the flight line all day long. So I kind of got out of active duty and had no real idea of what I wanted to do. Started going to school using the GI Bill and went for criminal justice because in my head, I was thinking, hey, I already have 4 years working for the government, might as well get a government job and hopefully get a pension at the end of it. About 3 years into college, I decided there's no chance I'm getting into anything in the government, and I was just wanted to completely go a different route. And luckily, my wife is in sales. She's actually used to work with Mari at their previous job, and then we all ended up at Zoom Info. So I've been through kind of every role so far at Zoom Info. Started entry level, brand new as an SDR, making cold calls, fielding inbound leads, setting meetings. From there, I went to outbound SDR, so actually calling out to people. on the new business side. So I was basically calling complete strangers and trying to sell them to take a meeting. From there, I went to the CSM work for about 3 weeks. I didn't really want to do that, but I was told it was kind of the next step in my career. And that was how I would get to being an account manager. And I think after 3 weeks of just being very persistent that I needed to be in a selling role and I wanted to actually close business, they kind of just got annoyed to the point where they're like, all right, forget it. We'll send you to an account management role. So I was there
And
for
for
3
those of
weeks.
you who don't know, a CSM is a customer success manager. So there are counterparts in sales where they're kind of like your go-to person in operations. They don't carry a quota. They're still kind of helping us along with like operational like help on the day-to-day for our customers, but they're not actually having those like money conversations, renewal conversations, upsell conversations.
Exactly. Yeah. And we work hand in hand, like CSMs and AMs. A lot of my calls, I have a CSM on it. And it works. Obviously, the CSM path was not what I wanted to do, but it definitely helped going to an AM role and already knowing that kind of customer success, customer service, how to get the most value out of the product that we can. So it did help, but I was pretty persistent on wanting being in a sales role. And then since then, I've been through a couple different account management teams at ZoomInfo still. So there's a lot of qualities I feel like that being in the military can kind of bring over to being in sales right off the bat. A lot of times, I'm sure you guys are going to run to this because I definitely did. My first day of training, I'm sitting in a room with a bunch of 22-year-olds. I'm 28 years old and in very different spots in our lives. So being in the military though, like day one, you already have that kind of professionalism and the work ethic and the resourcefulness where a lot of these kind of younger reps that were being hired outside this is their first job ever. And it was kind of, I felt like I was more prepared right off the bat than kind of your standard kid fresh out of college. But also just like having tough conversations. I mean, everyone in the military has had, or at least been a part of a tough conversation. So being able to de-escalate and being able to kind of keep your cool when you're having a difficult conversation, because they're going to happen in sales. But also having the work ethic and the ability to kind of stay on something and really see the job through worked a lot. And like when I was brand new in a sales rep, and it helped me kind of progress a lot faster than some of the like newer reps that were getting onboarded. So if there are, I think Hillary's obviously going to introduce yourself here too, but afterwards we can get the questions. If there's any specific questions you have from the military to civilian side, I can do my best to help with all of those questions, because obviously I, in the last 3 years, did all of that myself. So I can definitely speak to it.
All right, my turn. So as Mari and Mark mentioned, I'm Hillary Scott. I'm the new account manager. So yeah, I've got a very similar story to both of them. I started a job that was not sales. I went to school straight out of undergrad for political science, thinking, this sounds great. There's gonna be lots of jobs for that. And very early on, I was like, no, I actively don't want to do this. So for a long time, I worked in account-based roles, but not sales. So I worked in supply chain. I landed in higher ed fundraising, which is also very relationship-based. And after about 4 years of higher ed fundraising in a very small town, I thought it was time for a change. So I jumped ship. I found an account management role because, like Mari, I really like that relationship building. I like those long-term conversations and being able to track things over time. And so I did that for about 2 years. I moved over to B2C marketing just for a change of pace. In my old world, it was a very small sector. It was in veterinary health. And I just wanted to see a different side of the business. But after a very short while, I realized that, I liked having those external conversations. I liked, working with accounts to find out what their next step was, how it could help, all that fun stuff. I'm not sure if you can see the wall behind me, but that is my husband's Marine Corps uniform and a ceremonial sword that I don't think he's supposed to have. But the less said about that, the better. So from a military and or civilian side, I know that the change can be turbulent. So I think that a program like this is really beneficial. And like Mark said, having that dedication and just being able to be methodical and, what's the word that I want? It's Monday and there wasn't enough coffee this morning. Diligent and working towards something is really going to serve you in the long run. So happy to answer any questions. My rant was short and sweet, but happy to answer anything. I see Eric and Carlotta. Eric, do you want to go first?
Sure. I appreciate it, Hillary. I've got a friend, Matt Waltz. He worked for IDEX, Veterinary Services up in the Northeast, as a salesperson. Had two questions from Mark. Mark, the first one, how long do you think it took you to transition from military to civilian, and anything you'd recommend for us? And the second portion was for your cold calling. That's something we're knee deep in right now. Did you have a value statement that you used that you found success with, just as an example?
Yeah, so the first one, I guess I am not even fully transitioned, I guess, because I'm still in the National Guard. So it is kind of like a weird line that I have to walk, where when I put the uniform back on for a weekend and then come back to work, it's a very, very different kind of atmosphere. But transitioning over, I feel like a lot of people come out and they just are like, hey, I have no idea what I want to do. I just know I no longer want to be in the military. So, or they're just done for that, or they've retired and finished their time, and they're thinking, hey, like I've got to start something new and I don't really know where to go from here. That is definitely the most difficult thing for me. I mean, I came out working on airplanes, and I tried doing that on the civilian side, and was just within 6 months, I knew that's not what I want to do anymore. But finding the sales role, it really is a spot where you don't see too many veterans, I feel like, right off the bat saying, hey, I want to go and get into sales afterwards. But it really does end up being a pretty good fit for a lot of the people who have served before that. Just with the skill set that we already have. I know a lot of it's technical, but on the non-technical side, it really makes the transition a lot easier. And remind me, what was the second half of that?
The second portion was about cold calling. Do you have a value statement that you found traction with to be most successful, as an example?
So when I was making cold calls, I was on the new business side. I really, what separated how I did things, because there's going to be a lot of different styles from SDRs when you're making cold calls. Something that I always kind of led with was obviously getting someone's attention is the hardest part, and getting them to stay on the phone. That's step one. Most of the time they're just going to hang up on you or try to dismiss it quickly. So it really, I was trying to do a lot of research beforehand so that when I do get them on the phone, having just one kind of statement that I would lead with would never really work for me, because I always want to make it tailored towards whoever I'm speaking to. So if I'm going to call a company, I mean, not to pitch my own product here, but you look in Zoom info, you hear about the description of the company, figure out kind of what makes them tick, what's going to be their reason to want this product, so that when you do get that maybe 10 to 15 seconds where you can pitch somebody, you can lead with what you think would help the most. For example, for Zoom info, we have a product intent, which is basically a way that we can tell you who's looking for your services just by kind of their own activity on their own research, basically. So what I used to do is I would look up like, hey, this person does IT and they're looking for people looking for IT. And I would screenshot that, send it in an email and say, hey, what if I could tell you 20 companies in your specific location that are looking for IT right off the bat, instead of just sending over just kind of just dead value where someone could say, hey, like this looks like spam email. If someone opens up an email that says, hey, I can show you businesses looking for your product immediately, someone's going to open that email. So it's really about doing your research first, knowing what you're going to say going into the conversation, because activity is one big aspect of it. Just the more activity, eventually you're going to get people on the phone. But if you come to the activity prepared to have a good conversation, that's where it's really going to end up ending in a good meeting.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, I would say my first sales job, my sales director used to say with them a lot, what's in it for them. When you're talking, I don't know if that's something that Rally says, because you're nodding your head. It is. Like when you're talking, I used to do that all the time in my first sales job. I used to call and say like, hey, I'm Mari. I'm calling from company XYZ. Here's what I do. And it was really just about me and like what I am trying to do, and really wasn't about them at all. And as I've progressed, I've tried to kind of mirror what Mark says that he's doing, is that like, I'm calling you for a reason, but here's how that can benefit you. And that's how I try to build my like value statements.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mariana. Thanks, Mark. I appreciate it. That provides some good insight. I'll be followed by Carlotta.
Thanks, Eric. Hello, everyone. I have two questions. The first one, if either of the three of you all can answer it. My question is, have you ever had a sales rep or someone based off of their personality, anxiety, or anything like that, that just did not want to or have the desire to move to the next level because of that? So they were perfectly okay with staying at SDR or staying SMS because of anxiety, being an introvert, not really wanting to have that face-to-face kind of connection with the client. And if so, how did you deal with that? And is it okay to stay in that position? And then my second question, Maria, I know you said you were recommended from being a recruiter by another salesperson, but for either Mark or Hillary, and I know Mark, you said your wife was in sales, so maybe that helped. Without having a sales background, how difficult did you find it to maneuver into sales, knowing that that was not necessarily your background?
I'll take a first crack at this if you guys don't mind. So from the introvert standpoint, I, believe it or not, I'm a painful introvert. I hang out with a crowd of people and that's it for me for like 4 days. So I'm going to answer your question by saying something different. The reason why I stay in sales and what actually kind of fills my cup is the fact that I get to have more meaningful conversations. So, moving from an SDR role to an account manager role, I think really approaching those conversations from a place of just being genuine. And, it is, kind of a numbers game, like Mark was saying, like, you're eventually going to find someone to speak to and crack that nut. But I would say just lean on your strengths and then, the rest will follow. But I see you in terms of anxiety or being an introvert. I joke that I don't leave the house during the week. I'm such a homebody. I bring my daughter to daycare and like, that's my big to-do for the day. And then from a background standpoint, I wouldn't be concerned about that being a hindrance. So like I mentioned, and I worked a whole bunch of different roles before that. I worked in supply chain, fundraising. I had a bunch of just really wacky jobs all over the place. I worked in customer service. I worked in EDI tech roles for Wayfair for a while. Again, lean on your strengths. And I think that when you find what makes you tick within a sales organization, so whether it's, an SDR role, a CSM role, or an AM role, really lean into that. And again, the rest will follow. So I wouldn't worry about that being a hindrance or holding you up.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of different companies as well, there's going to be mobility inside that, or like internally to that company. At Zoom Info, you start as an SDR, but there's a million different directions you can go into. And the advice that I would give you is if that is how you feel and you're not sure if down the road having a customer facing kind of role is your long-term goal, is as you move through and as you continue to get promoted and move through the ranks, make sure your manager or whoever the person is that's going to make that decision when you move up, make sure they know how you're feeling, what you think, and they can find a role that works best for you. So you don't have to stay in sales. Like once you do the SDR role, or if you want to stay as an SDR, there's people at Zoom Info who have been SDRs for a long time, and there's ways that you can kind of progress in the SDR role, but stay in that same organization. So it's really, there's going to be a lot of different directions depending on the company that you can go into, and really you find what makes you the happiest and you think that you have the best shot to really shine in, and you can, as long as you make it known to your manager, that's the way you do it, is just by having those conversations and being very upfront.
To wrap up, I would encourage you to think about our roles as part of a greater organization that's a revenue operations organization. So Hillary, Mark, and I, we have quotas. We are in traditional sales roles that we actually get contracts signed and we like have business transactions. If you talk to an account executive is selling to new business. They're going out there, they're finding new companies to target. So they're having the same types of transactions. But there are so many supporting roles under that umbrella that are supporting our, our sales motion that are not directly tied to a quota, and that those people are building professional careers within and growing and getting promoted kind of within those branches. So a customer success manager, like I mentioned before, I have customer success managers for all of my accounts that I work with. They're not having any of the transaction and conversations, but they're definitely impacting revenue. Are you good with people? Are you like, do you want to continue like having that connection, but you're not interested in having like that sales, that sales conversation? Maybe a customer success role is appropriate. We have what we call here internally our overlay roles. An overlay is really anything that a company might need to bring in additional support for. So when I started as a MINFO, I actually started as an overlay role. And I was an overlay, kind of like an associate account manager to various account managers. And I just helped pick up the pieces from anything that they needed assistance with. Now we have overlay roles for any new products that we launch. So if we launch, we're growing so fast. Past 2 years, we've acquired like 8 companies. It's kind of hard to keep up with all of those, acquisitions and products. So we have overlay roles, people that come in, solutions consultants that come in, help us pitch, help us like get the wording right with the technical piece right. And some of them are directly tied to a quota, some of them are not. They're just kind of supporting roles in the sales motion. So under like the revenue operations roles, there are a lot of options for like different personalities if you don't feel like, cold calling and like going after new business is the right fit for you. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you all very much for your responses.
Sam, you're up.
Hey, thanks for coming out, Zoom Info team. I have a two-parter. For your guys' company, what's the time frame for like upward mobility? And second was, I don't know, I just lost my train of thought for a second, sorry.
We can start with that one. I think it depends on what kind of role you're going for. Like to Mark's point, he was an SDR and his goal was to come over to the account management side of the house. So the path there was to become a customer success manager for a couple of months, really get to know the product, and then become an account manager. There are my SDR right now, for example, she doesn't want to become an account manager. She wants to become a really good SDR and then an SDR manager. So she's going through like those steps. And I think that every couple of months they do, you kind of move up to like higher more strategic accounts. And then eventually you can apply for a management role. So it kind of depends on the path that you want to take. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Hillary or Mark.
Yeah, I mean, it's the SDR role is really, it varies at every company. For us, it was when I started, it was like around a year to a year and a half. It would take from start to either going to an AE or an AM or something else. Basically, to get out of the SDR role, it usually was about a year to a year and a half. But it really depends. There's some companies where you could be an SDR for 2-3 years. There's some where you could be even shorter. It's something that I would definitely, if progressing out of the SDR role into another role is something important to you, something I would suggest is as you're interviewing for these companies, ask them during the interview, what is your typical, what's the typical path from SDR to AM or AE, and how long does that take? Because first of all, that's going to help you make an informed decision, but also it shows right off the bat that you care about progressing and you care about taking control of your career. And that's super helpful as you progress, is the more that you bring it up and you tell your peers and people above you, this is what I want to do, it works. I mean, I got promoted from SDR to AM because I set a meeting with our VP at the time, who barely knew me, and just basically asked to pick his brain. He did an impromptu interview on me, and then that day he called my VP and asked that I be promoted the next day. So the more that you ask and the more that you try to figure out like what's my next step and how do I get there, and you show that initiative, you're going to get moved up.
And the only thing I would add to that is, if you are looking to strengthen skills, just be proactive about coaching. Maybe there's someone on your current team that if you do want to progress, like Tamari's example, from being an SDR to an amazing SDR to a manager, book meetings with your teammates and just say, hey, like, how are you doing XYZ? And pull those skill sets where you may not be as strong, or if you hear them say something like, oh, I want to know how you approach this, like, what's your talk track there? And feel free to like incorporate and braid that into your current process and really just work on your skill set that way. And just, again, to Mark's point, just, keep at it. And yeah.
Thank you. I just remember my second question. When it comes down to like the mentorship and coaching, let's say that people do see you struggle with the sales part, whether you're SDR, but they feel like that you're better at talking to somebody and communicating better. How well will that coach or mentor push you to go into that different role, maybe, or suggest it up to their leadership saying, hey, this might not be the best, but I think he might be the best for this role?
I think that really depends on I hate to say it depends, but it depends on the relationship that you've built and established with that mentor. So I have a mentor here internally as ZoomInfo who I ask for her candid feedback. I ask her if, I'm like, am I overthinking this scenario? If I trying to like kind of build at something or go for a role, she kind of guides me through it. And I ask those tough questions. I think that you guys are really learning a really invaluable lesson to Rally's point earlier, when you're calling and you're pitching your skills now to companies, this is not something that stops when you get a job. You have to constantly, like to Hillary's point, you have to constantly keep doing it, whether it's kind of going to peers or pushing back on your mentor. So the relationship that you've established with that mentor, you kind of have to sometimes drive that and push for the feedback that you want and how, yeah, sorry, I'm having a hard time kind of wrapping up that sentence.
If you sit still, your career will go stagnant. The more that you reach out and show that you want the next step or show you want that next thing, it's going to be seen. And sometimes it takes just having a difficult conversation with a peer or whether it be your manager. And the more you bring it up, the more you will get moved up. Every single time I have a one-on-one, I talk about my next goal or how do I get to my next goal, and just take it kind of one step at a time. When I got here, my plan was I not only want to be an AM, but I want to be an AM manager. So I've gotten to the point where I'm an AM. So now every single time I talk to my manager, I harass him pretty much to the point where I'm like, how do I get into management? So the more you continue that conversation, once they do have that conversation about, oh, okay, we've got to figure out managers for next month, then your name is going to pop up because they're going to be like, I just need Mark to shut up about it. So he's been complaining about it for like 6 months. So that's my advice.
And two, don't feel beholden to have upward conversations. It doesn't always have to be your mentor or your manager. It can be your colleagues too. So if you want to learn more about, using Mari's example, about the overlays and understanding exactly the nuances of their job and how they intersect with you and other teams, it gives you a more global perspective within the company. So you can say, okay, I want to be a manager. Maybe I don't want to be an AM manager. Maybe I do eventually want to go to an overlay and be an overlay manager. So it just gives you a broader perspective of kind of the lay of the land.
Yeah. And if anything, this skill set, even if you decide that a traditional sales role is not the right fit for you, you're learning a really good skill, whether you go into operations or whether you go into marketing, like any part of the business, you have to advocate for yourself. So ZoomInfo, for example, just because that's where we work, is a really, really fast growing company. When I joined ZoomInfo, I think we had about 1,500 employees. We've more than doubled that. So while I do a great job and like I have that everyday connection with my direct manager, my VPs aren't necessarily thinking about me on a regular basis because there are 700 account managers. So if I'm not going after and kind of having those conversations to advocate for myself, then, and to Mark's point, kind of staying at the top, then no one's going to do that for me. So that's something that you need to kind of push on your end as well.
Thank you.
Roman, you're up.
Hey y'all, this question's for Mark. When you got out of active duty, did you go directly into like a job, or did you kind of give yourself some time to like rest after, coming off a, active duty military? I guess what advice can you give in that aspect of that?
Yeah, for sure. So when I got out, I was in Korea when I got out, and basically got home and started terminal leave. My job, which I'm sure most of you will probably understand this, is completely undermanned. So they never let me take leave almost the entire time I was in. So I had a lot of terminal leave. So that gave me a nice little buffer where I had like almost 2 months where I was being paid, and I could kind of figure out what I wanted to do. Whether it be applying for jobs, or I knew that obviously I had the GI Bill so I could go to school. I did, after terminal leave, I did like 6 months at a commercial, like it was at the Portland, Maine Jetport, working on like small independently owned airplanes, and I didn't love it. So I always had that feeling like I'm behind. Like all of my friends who went to college had been in their jobs for 4 to 6 years already, and I was coming out of the military without a degree, and I just felt like I was like panicked, thinking I was not going to be able to kind of catch up. But as I've learned now, that's not even close to the case. So I did work there for 6 months and then went back to school. One of the things that like I obviously knew a little bit about, but didn't really understand the full depth of how it worked, was how much like you can just kind of live off the GI Bill while you're going to school. I was going to school 3 days a week, and then the other 2 days a week, I was working at the other like weekends as well. So basically 3 days of school, 4 days of work. I was working at a bank as a teller because it just had flexible hours, so I knew that I could do both. And then obviously I was getting paid from the GI Bill for my BAH and my housing. And obviously that whole time I was in school, I was working towards getting my degree so I could get into some sort of job, but I didn't really know 100% what I want to do, like I said. So it really depends. I mean, if you feel like I know when I got out, I really wanted to break, which is why I got that 2 months of terminal leave and kind of just use that to relax a little bit, and try to figure out kind of what my next step was. But also, as I was going to school, I used that as a way to kind of working towards something, but I hadn't really made a decision on where I was going to go from there.
I see. Thank you, Mark. I'll give it to Kamara next.
Thanks, Roman. Thank you so much for you guys coming to speak with us today. I have 2 questions. My first one is for Mark. I'm also transitioning from active to National Guard, and I just wanted to know a little bit about your experience with employers kind of respecting that decision and being able to do both.
Yeah, I remember being very worried about that when I came to ZoomInfo specifically. So the first job, I actually did have a job fresh out of college. I honestly forgot because I was only there for a year, and sometimes it was kind of a forgettable job, but I was also a recruiter. And similar to Mari, I was on the recruiting side where I wasn't doing sales. That job was a much smaller company. They never really gave me a hard time about, because obviously we have like the 2 weeks of annual training that we would have to go to. As long as basically what I made sure of was day one, I wanted them to know, hey, I have this commitment, I'm going to do it. So it really doesn't matter what's going on at work. I have to go do this. So it's going to happen. And I never had any issues with any of the employers, because right off the bat, or as soon as I knew what the dates were, if I was going to have to miss work, it is what it is. And I mean, I've had a couple months ago, I had to go to Montenegro for a couple of weeks with the National Guard. The second I found out, I let my manager know. It was no issue. They just blocked off, and honestly, they covered while I was gone. But it is definitely something that's still in the back of my mind, is like, we can still be deployed with the Guard. So if I'm gone for 6 months, will my job still be the same when I get back? Am I going to be missing out on things? Like, is my career going to go stagnant? And And the same thing with getting into a manager role. I was worried, hey, if I'm in a manager role and I have to leave for 6 months, is that going to be an issue, or is that going to make it so they don't want to put me up to a manager role because they know I have that commitment? But I will tell you right now, I've not run into any issues with it. Obviously, I've only worked at that other small company in Zoom Info since being in the National Guard. So is there companies out there that it could be an issue? Maybe. But like I said, as long as you're upfront with them and let them know what the commitment is. And a lot of people just don't understand what it is. When I came in, so I was in the National Guard, the first day that I like went to drill, they were like, oh, like, you're still in the military. I'm like, yeah, like I actually still have to go do stuff. So just be upfront, just let them know what they're getting into. And I've never seen anyone, usually when I say I'm in the National Guard, it's responded to as like, oh, wow, that's a good thing. Not, oh, this is going to be tough to work around your schedule. It's going to help you. It's not going to hurt you in almost every case.
Great answer. Thank you. And then my second question is for all of you. I'd love to know what your day-to-day in your positions look like.
Gonna just keep going, Mark?
Okay, Mark,
Sure.
you start.
Yeah. So in the AM role, how about this? I'll tell you what the SDR role was like. And then Hillary and Mari can tell you about AM, just so that, because I was an SDR at Zoom Info pretty recently. So when I was an SDR, depending on inbound and outbound, but either way, the most of it was obviously just the activity in the dials. I tried to block off times to do research on the companies that I was looking into. But most of my day was being given a list, telling to call through this list of companies, doing the research, making sure I'm calling the right people, and making anywhere from 100 to 250 dials a day. It's not like that much volume at every company. But to be completely honest, the more reps is really what made me transition easier, because I just had a lot of conversations in a very short time. And you learn a lot on these calls. So a lot of it was making the cold calls, but also trying to identify good fit companies and spending a little bit of extra time to go and make a very tailored email to the right people in that business. Obviously, the activity is helpful to just constantly kind of be in the ear of the people at that company. But I always found the way to get a really good fit company that's going to eventually turn into revenue for the company is to really go out of your way to tailor an email. And just like Mari said, you figure out what did they need from you, what's going to help them, and you show that to them in an email. And a lot of the times that's going to lead to not only them taking a meeting, but them taking a meeting that they're actually serious about. A lot of SDRs, it's all about activity, and they just want like any person who will say yes. And now when I'm on the other side of it, sometimes I'll get meetings from an SDR, and I'm like, I get on it and I'm like, oh, like I heard you wanted to look into these 3 features of our platform. And they're like, oh no, I was just having trouble logging in, and your SDR called and said, will you take a meeting? And I said, yes. So like those are the type of meetings you don't want to set as an SDR, but it's really just a fine balance of doing the research on these companies, but just a mass amount of activity at the same time. The AM role is a lot different, but they will help you kind of with that transition when you're over with training, or honestly, when you're getting to that point where you're at a higher level SDR and you know you're ready to make that jump, go out of your way to talk to account managers or account executives that you've worked with and just ask them, how are they doing things? What's made them successful, and what do you think will get you to that next level? That way, when they do take it or bring you in for an interview or something internally to bring you up to that next role, you can show them you've already been doing the research and been doing the work to be ready for that position before they even get to it. Hillary or Mari, you want to take the AM role, or I can do that too. It's up to you guys.
Mari, do you want next?
Yeah, you can go.
So yeah, like Mark said, from an AM perspective, and I'm kind of in a unique spot. So I'm pretty new to the organization. I got hired at the end of March, so I'm still within my ramp period. So the organization will help guide you to get to where you need to be. So I joke that, once my ramp ends, they've kind of set me off into the wild and I'm free to do what I want, which is half true. But it's really about targeting, understanding, to Mari's point earlier, there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle, and having your arms around them well enough to have those intelligent, strategic conversations. So I have a list, I have my book of business, and just understanding, who needs what from me and when, and in what capacity. So being able to have those initial conversations like, hey, I'm Hillary, I'm your new account manager, up to, those contractual conversations as well. And just learning that interpersonal nuance of who needs what from me, how hard can I push, who needs more of a white glove treatment, and then kind of leaning on what Mark said as well, just calling through people. So yeah, I have my main point of contact in an account, but I'm also going to call the users and just say, hey, like I'm here as an additional resource, and get kind of the inside skinny that way too, because you'll learn a lot more about what might need to happen from people leveraging the tool or the product or ZoomInfo, whatever it might be, that you might not get from the admin or the main point of contact because they're not in it every day necessarily. And so just it's more information gathering as well, and really just that strategy piece of trying to be ahead of the curve, anticipate what the customer might need.
Yeah, I think all that I would add to that is different teams and like different directors and VPs are going to have different strategies of how they like to work. Like my former manager, who Mark and Hillary now work for, has been in sales his whole life, and he kind of likes to run his business or help us along a certain way. I'm working for somebody different now who just became a manager, so he now is kind of trying to institute a lot of what he did last year within our team, since he's a new manager, and what he did worked for him. We have a playbook. So a lot of companies, when you start, they're going to have a playbook or job expectations of things that you have to do. One of the things that I'm focused on right now is building account plans. So kind of looking at all of the accounts that I work with and having a place where I can go and find all the information from the main points of contacts, the users, their strategies, really asking them, how can ZoomInfo be the partner that you need so that we are doing all of the things that kind of meet those expectations. Our day-to-day looks like a lot of emails, a lot of calls, a lot of strategic calls on a regular basis, but also building cases, right? So anytime a company is going to allocate spend with you, they want to make sure that they're getting that ROI. So we also spend some time building out what does ROI look like for that company, digging up that information from when the customer first came aboard 12 months ago and seeing okay, over the past 12 months, have we met them with that ROI so that they feel comfortable reinvesting in the partnership again. Does that answer your question? Any follow-ups?
Yes, great answers. Thank you so much. I'll pass it on to Carlotta.
Hello again. Two more questions. One, when you all came on to ZoomInfo, did you feel as though coming into that position, you were walking into a company where they had realistic expectations for you? And then two, my second question, Mari, this is for you. Since you've been in the sales role, it seems like a little longer, at least with the company a little longer. What is one piece of advice that you would give us as coming in as new sales reps?
Oh, that's a broad question. I think the biggest piece of advice that I can give is that being in sales, especially a quota carrying role, is really like running your own business. The accounts are obviously not ours, they are ZoomInfo's customers, but I am the person responsible for that account that I work with. My CEO isn't talking to them, my CFO isn't talking to them, my VP of account management maybe is being brought on one instance, but I am the face of ZoomInfo. I am running my own business, and my actions, like how hard I work, really directly impact how well I do. So that's the one thing I would keep in mind is, yeah, you're like really the owner of like that book of business, of your destiny. You have to, like, to our conversation that we had, I think was with Sam earlier, is that like you have to kind of forge your own path and make things happen. No one's going to do it for you. You really have to kind of say, like, take ownership of it. And that directly will correlate to your success.
I'd say the biggest piece of advice I can give you is sales is very up and down. It's not always just great, everything's going well, business is closing 24/7. There's going to be times where you're going to be sitting at your computer ready to throw it out your window. And then there's going to be some times where you don't ever want to stop working because you feel like every person you talk to is ending in a closed deal. It's really learning to manage. And my wife was telling me this over and over again before I got into sales as well. It's really being able to manage the expectation and know when you're in like a little bit of a rut, it's going to get better if you just continue doing what has made you successful in the past. It's just, there's sometimes you can only control so much of what happens. So if something is working, keep doing it. Learn how to expand upon that and do better. But at the same time, when things are not going well, they will get better. You really just got to keep kind of working at it and not get mad or let that kind of affect you. Yeah, it's exactly like a deployment. There's times when you're like at that last month of a deployment and you're ready to kill everyone in your tent. When you're doing sales, there's going to be times like that where you are just, nothing is going right. It seems like every day you get in your emails full of people being like, hey, here's a laundry list of issues we have. Things aren't going well. But then there's some weeks where you come in and every single time you open your email, there's someone being like, hey, I have a bunch of money I want to spend. What can you sell me? So it will all end up kind of evening itself out. But if you just keep doing what makes you successful in the first place, you'll have a successful career. I know I've only been in sales for 3 years, but that's just in the first 3 years. You can tell it's like every couple of months is up and down. So
I would counterpoint that.
Go for it.
So I had a month, this was November of 2020, and I could not sell anything for my life. I could have been selling it for $2. No one was buying anything. And what I was doing, like historically that was working, wasn't really working. So I had to kind of think outside the box. And I think it was Hillary who said this before, like I booked meetings with all of the high performing reps in my team. And I was like, what are you doing that I'm not doing? And we're recording every conversation that we're having. I listened to all of my calls from deals that didn't close. I went back to high performing reps, listened to their calls, noticed that they were kind of pitching things differently. And I was talking for way too long about some boring stuff that nobody cared about. So I do agree with that, like to an extent, like do what you do that you've been successful. Sales does have your ups and downs, but sometimes you just got to work hard and change it up and see what else you have to do.
Agreed.
Help.
Definitely.
Yeah, the only thing I think I would add to that, and I think Carla, to your earlier question around like reasonable expectations, is for where Mark and I sit and Mari when she was on the team, it's very much like what do you know is going to happen? Like you walk in on any given week, like, what's on deck. The sales organization is also going to ask you to stretch because that's sort of the name of the game, right? You want to, close more deals, book that business. So there will be the reasonable expectation, but like there will also be the ask for like just a little bit more, like give it that last, 110% just to get it over the line. And so I think Mari and Mark both mentioned this, like, you're going to stretch yourself in some ways and learn and grow. They're not going to ask anything that's wildly unreasonable. Your first day as an SDR or an AM, whatever it might be. They're not going to say, hey, Carlotta, you need to close this deal and it's your entire quote. Like that's not going to be a thing right out of the gate. So I wouldn't worry about anything like that. And then just in terms of advice, I would also say, and I think Mari just mentioned this, but ask questions. Whether you're a new hire or whether you've been on a team for 5 years, keep asking questions. So whether it's strategy or if it's an acronym that you're brand new and you don't know what it means and you feel like you're going to be, the new kid asking the weird questions. I even preface questions on our team chat being like, hey, new kid question, what is this really simple thing? And everyone's like, oh yeah, this is blah, blah, blah. And you find it here. So it's just one of those things that kind of come with the territory.
Yeah. Well, to your first question, which we kind of, sorry that I skipped over, was that I think that also comes back to your previous question around like what role is a better fit for you. But as you're going through transitioning through this program and applying for roles, Also talk, like during your interview process, talk to the company that you're talking to, interviewing with, about their culture. So ZoomInfo, for example, I mentioned that when I joined, we kind of like more than doubled in size. This is a high growth organization. So as Hillary mentioned, the ask is going to be a little bit more intense. I talk to sales organizations all the time. I work with sales and marketing teams. We all do. When I'm talking to organizations, I talk to sales organizations that are fine where they're at. They are 30 years old and they're kind of fine, like not growing, just maintaining. I've heard that from sales leaders before, or I've heard from sales leaders that, you know, I want my team to triple their output or quadruple their output. So those are all questions as you go and you're kind of interviewing and trying to find your place in like a revenue organization. What is my place here? Ask those questions. What kind of goals does your sales team have? Who in the team is meeting quota? If somebody isn't meeting quota, what's the procedure? Like, is it like automatically to like a performance plan, or do you guys have a plan in place to kind of help that person get along? When somebody isn't doing well, like, are they buddied up? Or do they get more meetings? Do they get more help? What is the training process? What does the RAM process look like? So all questions that we can kind of, you know, come back to that later and give you more examples of that you should be asking during the interview process to make sure that that organization is a good fit for you.
Thank you all so much.
Robert, go for it.
Yeah, I hate to cut it short. We got these guys till 11 o'clock. We could wrap it up with Eric and Ruben. And then I really appreciate you guys coming. It's always nice to hear from ZoomInfo. So.
Absolutely.
I appreciate it. Thank you for coming in. Helps us understand, because, you know, we know the titles, the 4 titles, but we don't know what the jobs are, what they entail, and every company is a little bit different. So understanding what each level is at and how your days are different and how you engage with customers and everything is really beneficial and helpful. Personally, I'm totally surprised all the information that's in ZoomInfo, and that's pretty incredible. So I think it's really neat, and it's great to learn from you guys, and I just want to say I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. Ruben, you're on mute.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Just to reiterate, thank you guys again for your time. I really appreciate you taking this time to give us all this like valuable info. I'm just gonna go ahead and take a screenshot, if you don't mind, for our LinkedIn page, to, you know, to make everyone, you know, rich and famous, you know, in a few years.
Lovely.
I was counting on 1, 2, and 3. Now let me see if it went through. Oh, yes, we are good. Thank you very much.
Cool. And I know the last time we did this, Mari, I mentioned this as well. If any of you want, add me on LinkedIn. If you have questions, feel free to message them over to me, and I'm happy to help and be here for a resource for all of you guys. If I don't answer right away, I check LinkedIn like maybe once a day. So I'll definitely get back to you. And like I said, any questions, I can help.
Same. And quick plug for Hillary and her team. Sorry, you can do it, Hillary.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, we have a full team here to support you, Hillary and her counterpart, Emily. So if you guys have any questions specifically to ZoomInfo, you're curious about the data gathering process, or really any like of the motions that we run here internally for our sales team, that's always something, a session that her and Emily can run for you guys as well.
And I think Emily and I had a conversation with Raleigh late last week, and I think that is on the books for the 21st. So we have one coming up. So think about any questions you might have. Feel free to send them over to Raleigh or to me directly. And also, like Mark, if you want to connect on LinkedIn, I'm a little less diligent about checking LinkedIn, but always happy to connect. Yeah, and then feel free to ask any questions that pop up.
Great to meet you all. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, guys.
You guys got anything else? You guys are go to lunch.
Robert.
Yes.
Yeah, real quick. Were you on the call earlier when I was talking to Riley about my The
Your
conference.
Philadelphia thing? Yes.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
Reading is essential. Yeah, it's good. Reading, I'm signed up for the right one. I just wasn't looking at the date. Reading is essential. I'm good.
Okay. And then
All right.
so you cleared that with them to let them know when you'll be gone, or?
No, he got off already. He got off before I realized I was looking at the wrong thing, because when I opened the link, the
Mhm.
receipt that they sent, it says virtual pass. So virtual
Okay.
pass is on the, yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Reading is essential.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.